four coworkers yesterday. I had this discussion with four coworkers yesterday. So when it came to the purchase of my Tesla, um, the price was it was 54.9 or 54.5, but there was a $5,000 federal credit, which made it 49.5. At that time, when I was looking around, like a comparable Accord V6 or Camry V6 was probably in the $43,000 range anyway. So it was, it was a little bit more expensive, but it was in the rough ballpark. When I looked at fuel costs, so I only live about like 15, 20 kilometers from work, so I don't have a huge drive. I basically go from the Lagimodiere, Regent, Grassy area to Costco over in St. James, so it's not a huge drive. But I was spending about $150 a month in gas previously. And then 5 years ago, when I looked initially, I was comparing kind of month versus month, and I was paying around $30 in electricity. So on a monthly basis, I was probably saving over $100 just in fuel costs. On top of that, what I think some people may not be aware of also is my maintenance costs. So anytime I went to the dealership for regular maintenance of my previous vehicle, it was over $700. So I was probably paying about $1,000 a year in maintenance costs. My maintenance cost for my Tesla is about $250 a year. Basically, they service the brakes because you don't use the brakes all that much because of the regenerative braking. So the brakes aren't used that much. So they just kind of, oil them, lube them, make sure they're kind of checked and stuff. And really that's it. And I take advantage of it at that time. I always do it in November. So that way when they check the brakes, they can also put my winter tires on for me at the same time. So I figure I'm saving about over $100 in gas and maybe $75 a month in maintenance costs. So I'm saving a significant amount of money, on a monthly basis. And those fuel costs were what they were back 5 years ago. I haven't done the math recently and what I would have been paying and stuff. So
Thank you, Devlin. Very interesting. Any follow-up to that or questions?
Clear. Oh, there's someone's asking a question, so I'll just wait.
Hi, it's Debbie. I'd like to know what regenerative braking is. I've heard of regenerative agriculture, but never regenerative braking.
absolutely. So I'll try not to. So basically, it's run by electric motors, which basically has magnets in it. So as it is, if I take the foot off the gas, the natural magnets provide a bit of resistance. That resistance will actually generate energy to put back into the batteries. You can put that on high or low. I put at the higher level. So as I take the foot off the gas, it actually starts to brake the car. So it's always a funny story. When my wife drove the vehicle for the first time, she stopped about 10 feet short of the stop sign because she wasn't prepared for the regenerative braking. So it's a way to kind of use the momentum of the vehicle and the electric motor to kick a little bit of electricity, a little bit of battery power back into the motor, back into the batteries themselves.
Thank you for that answer, Devlin. Thanks for your question, Debbie.
To
If I could
expand on
add
that.
one,
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Shell.
okay. I was just going to add that the concept of regenerative braking has been around for a while. It was in the very early electric vehicles, and it's also in hybrids like the Prius and other hybrids like that. So anything that has an electric motor could potentially tap into that capability. Essentially, when it's not running as a motor and you're running on the momentum of the vehicle, the motor acts as a generator, so it generates current rather than taking current to generate drive power. So it helps to keep the battery charged. So hybrids use that, electric vehicles use it. I'm not sure if fuel cell based vehicles do. What I heard from okay, they do.
Would you like to jump in, Ross? Anything else to share?
After I drove for a month or two back when I got my car in 2011, I sort of got the hang of how close I could get to the stop sign before I lifted my foot completely off the accelerator. And then the car would just naturally slow down itself, and all of the energy would go back into the battery, and you would use extremely little friction braking. So as a consequence, I just did my brakes about 2 months ago, and the car is 13 years old.
Wow. Wow, thanks, Ross.
That's how much you save in maintenance. Instead of doing the brakes every 3 or 4 years, you do them, 1/4 as often.
Oh, they sound
Yeah.
so much more elegant.
Well, there's no transmission, no spark plugs, no timing belt, no oil filter, none of all those other parts that you need. It's basically a battery, electric motor, brakes, and suspension.
Right, very different than the ICE internal combustion engine designs.
Yeah, yeah.
Less smelly, less clunky, less prone to breakdown.
Going back to the ICE vehicle after driving the EV for a while is a bit of a shock. And it's actually funny because you get so used to the resistive braking, you take your foot off the gas and it slows down. And like Devlin said, if you've got it set high, it slows down dramatically. And
Yeah.
then you get in the ICE vehicle and you're bombing down the highway and you're going to pull off at a turnoff and you take your foot off the gas and it keeps going. It's like, what's happening? You have to brake. They're funny though. Like the Tesla have the pedals. It does too. Paddles
Yeah.
by the steering wheel. So the cars actually have paddles behind the steering wheel that you can increase or decrease or increase the braking level, and
Yeah.
finally pull the paddle to stop. So you never have to use your brake pedal except in an emergency. So
Yeah, I
takes a bit of getting used to.
I set mine in the screen. I don't have the steering wheel paddles. But
Okay.
again, I barely use the friction brakes like Ross said. I'm
Yeah.
always like gliding, and like you just get so used to it.
Right.
And yeah,
thank
the
you.
growling of our gas car and the smell, you start to really notice those things. It's really a pleasure to drive it.
Nice. Good to hear. Any questions, folks? Anyone care to introduce themselves and ask anything of any of our panelists?
I'll just jump in, Janine, to looking at
Sure.
because I know you guys had a little list of some, or I think Blair put the list together. So oh, sorry, Laura, you have a question?
Yes, go ahead, Laura. You're on mute.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of, since nobody was asking, I thought I'd ask the obvious question. How is it in winter?
So from a traction standpoint, so mine is a rear wheel drive, and it's actually very good because all of the weight, instead of the weight sitting where your motor is, over the front wheels, all of the weight sits between the wheelbase, so underneath where you're sitting. So it has a really good weight distribution, a really good center of gravity, and electric vehicles are a bit heavier, so it does give you better traction. So it would be comparable to I think any other like really good like front wheel drive or all wheel drive. So my previous car was an all wheel drive, and it had maybe a little bit of digging power because I had the four wheels moving. But as far as otherwise, it's like I go around a corner, and the traction control just kind of keeps it under control, and I have no issue whatsoever as far as drivability. As far as range, I think there's a misconception like gas vehicles will lose range as well and lose a lot more range as a percentage. It's just that gas vehicles have more built-in range with with their gas tank. Electric vehicles will lose range because you're heating the car and stuff as well from the battery, so it doesn't lose as much. But I will probably lose anywhere from 25 to 30% of my range. But for my daily driving, I never have an issue. I need to be driving a significant amount for the impact. So my car has around 300 kilometers, I think, of range at 80% charge. So it would take me like if I'm losing a third of that, I'm losing like 100. I still have like 200 kilometers of range. so I can still get around quite well without any issues. Now, Blair, is yours an all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive?
It's got both. Like, so it actually has a snow mode. So you throw it in snow mode, it turns it into all-wheel drive, and it does some adjustment for slipping and sliding. So it's really effective. By default, it's rear-wheel drive. So and part of our choice in this vehicle was because the long range. It's like got a 500 kilometer range right now in the summer or spring. But in the winter, we were, I think, down to around 360 when we were starting to head down into the, minus 25s, minus 30. That's still plenty to get to the edge of the city and come back home. If we had to drive around the city, yeah, you got to stop and charge it. And the cool thing is that I wasn't really sure how that was going to work, but you go to a flow charger at a Canadian Tire, you jump out, plug the car in. What I would do first is go get a cup of tea somewhere, go plug it in, takes me 2 seconds, right? Blustery, blowing minus 25 day, jump in the car, turn the heater on, which slows the charging down a little bit, not enough to really worry about. Sit and have a cup of tea and read a book, jump out, unplug it, and hit the road. And meanwhile, everybody else is standing out there pumping gas in that cold wind. So I don't mind so much. It takes a little bit longer, but it wasn't onerous. So a couple stories on winter. Laura, did you have more questions? Is your hand still up on this?
I can ask
okay?
him later. Carry
Okay.
on.
So just a couple stories about winter. So there's one day that I'm pretty sure it was minus 30 here, and Gilles got in the EV because he had to head into the city for work, and I went out to get into the Santa Fe because I had an errand to run, and the Santa Fe was stone cold dead, wouldn't start. Like I wasn't going anywhere till I got out a battery charger and did a whole bunch of things to try to get it going. So it's a myth that the EV is not going to work. Electric motor is a pretty simple thing. You don't have to keep the oil warm. You don't have to do very much to it, and it's going to go. And the really cool thing is you get in that car, turn on the heat, which is air pump heat. It's so it's fairly efficient, and it's warm within seconds, even at minus 30. Whereas the Santa Fe, you have to be 15 minutes down the highway before you even feel a bit of warmth coming from it. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. And one more winter thing is I've heard people say, "Oh, aren't you worried about going in the ditch and you're going to die because the battery's going to run out of power and you're going to freeze to death?" Well, we're fortunate enough that we have a home, we can have an at-home charger, so we don't ever have to leave home without a full charge. Well, I could jump in my Santa Fe and find out I've got like next to nothing in the gas tank because that's our habit, right? Is we don't always check. Ditch the car. I got nothing in the Santa Fe. The EV at a full charge, this one at least, the heat pump heater will run for about 30 hours is what our math says. If you think you're going to be stuck longer than that, the heated seats will run for about 10 days. So we're not that worried. And our exhaust pipe, which we don't have, is not getting covered up by blowing snow and putting CO into the car. So yeah, I actually feel pretty confident that we're all right.
Great.
I think one thing to add into about charging, I also have a charger in my house. And so one of the things that the EV industry is fairly quickly over the past while is adopting the North American charging standard, which is the Tesla charger plug. So I think Hyundai and Kia have announced they're going to be adopting it. It'll come out in 2024, early 2025 in Canada. I know Ford has a lot of other EVs have announced that. So what that does is it's a much more efficient charger. It can do both at a charging at a higher rate. But now if you're a company trying to put out chargers, you don't have to choose between a number of standards. You can put out the one standard. So now it becomes much more easy to have a more consistent and easier for companies to come out and put a charging standard that's capable for more cars, more car types. So it makes it more profitable for them. So I think that's a really, really positive change that the industry has made over the past, started to move towards over the past 6 months.
I just have a question about charging. This might be a dumb question, but does it lessen the battery over time if you charge it up before it's fully dead? Or is there no problem with that?
So I know with my car, they said like and probably Blair and Ross, you can tell me your stories, but they say you shouldn't always charge to 100% all the time. So I charge mine to 80%. They said the range on the electric vehicles, like mine, is supposed to have 300,000, over 300,000 miles and only lose like 10% of the battery capacity. So it will lose some over time, but it's minor and it's not that significant. And especially with a larger battery, look at Blair's over 500 kilometers. You know, if he's losing 10% after 300,000, miles, not kilometers, he still has a ton of long-term range.
Yeah. My understanding too is it depends on the charger. And Cheryl might correct me about this. We charge ours to 100% at home. My understanding is that some of the newer batteries, and the Ionic included, actually is sort of fibbing about the 100%, that they actually put a margin built into it. It's there as a backup, but it's only like, it might be 95% when they say 100. The thing is, when you go to a public charger, like the flow chargers you see around the city that are called a level 3 charger that can charge the car rapidly, they're pumping a super high voltage in it. So it's like pumping stuff down at high pressure, basically. And that's harder on the batteries than the level 2 charger that we use at home, which is a 240 volt charger. So it depends on what kind of charger you're using and how fast it is. So
It also depends on what the battery chemistry is.
right.
So I have two different cars. One has a lithium titanate battery, and that one likes to be full all the time. So it has no charging restriction. Whereas my Tesla is the opposite. You actually can set the charging limit. So when I'm on the highway, I usually have it set to 90%. And when I'm just driving around town, I usually have it set to 60%. So it goes between 60% and 40%, and then I plug it in and fill it up again.
Right.
And,
The Hyundai has a like, you can actually set level 2,
Yeah.
level 3 charge limits. So we put it at 80 for the level 3 for the high end ones.
yeah.
Yep.
That
So
was following
that's
Hyundai's
for
own
nickel,
recommendations.
lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt battery.
Right.
And every battery is different. The latest Tesla batteries are lithium iron phosphate batteries, and their characteristics are again sort of the same but slightly different in some aspects.
Janine, I'm just going to
Yes.
ask maybe if the panelists or one of the panelists can just differentiate between the three levels of charging for some people here who aren't familiar with those three levels, kind of starting with 1 and working your way up to 3. You've already mentioned 3 a bit. Thank you.
So don't know who's best to do this, but level 1 charging is basically 110 volt. Plug it into a wall outlet or a parking lot outlet and plug it in and charge it. And it takes I think our car full charge, like from 0 to 100, would be a couple days. It's slow. So I need to get a few miles on to get to a place, or kilometers on, plug it in, and wait for a while, and you got to charge. But you can plug it in anywhere. The level 2 is 240 volts, so much like a dryer or a stove, a range. It's basically a tenth the time, so we can easily charge ours in something like 6 to 8 hours at home from 0 to 100, which never happens. We never get that low. But so you've always got to charge when you leave home, pretty much. And level 3 is unlike the other two, which are AC charges, which is what our household power is. The level 3 chargers are DC. They're often high voltage. I think some are up to 800 volts, right, Shell? Like, they're
Oh.
rare around here, but super high voltage. And so you can do a full charge in 20 minutes or half an hour. So those ones are really good. I need to pull in because, oh, I drove into the city, I did a bit of running around, and yeah, I might not make it back home. So I'm gonna just pull in here and I'll just charge for 10 or 15 minutes till I know I've got enough range to get back and hit the road. So does that sound make sense?
And just to add into, like, if I'm at my trailer, I'll sometimes, if I feel, oh, I gotta go somewhere, I want a little bit of an extra charge, so I'll actually go from home to work to our trailer in Bossier and home, and I don't need to charge. But sometimes if I gotta go somewhere and I plug in at the trailer, like at a level 1, I'll get like 9 kilometers an hour. When I plug in at the house in my garage with my Tesla charger, it's a level 2 charger, I'll get around 52 kilometers an hour. And then if I go to a Tesla supercharger, I'll usually get around 200 to 250
Whoa.
kilometers an
Yeah.
hour. So, and as newer technologies are coming out and newer battery types, newer electrical infrastructure, that will get even more, even faster stuff as well.
Well, thank you for that. That reminds me of a question that I wanted to ask, and that is, I've heard briefly, or maybe just read briefly, something about sodium ion batteries coming out of Europe. Could those of you who know more about that share something? Because I have real issues with the mining industry personally. And as someone who's lived on deep cycle batteries for now close to 40 years, I thought I was being super green doing that. But now when I understand about what some of the mining practices are, I have concerns. So please, Devlin, Blair, share what you know.
So they're always looking at new battery technologies because they are continually trying to get away from rare earth metals. Sodium is a very, very popular option because it's in the same area of the chemically and stuff. It's around the same type of chemistry, so same properties. What they're always trying to do is, they're looking at density, the amount of charge it can handle, and then the cycle and what happens to the cycle. So I know there are some sodium batteries that are coming out for EVs that are cheaper, but they're not as dense, so they're a little bit bigger currently. But like as in more research comes out and looking at different technologies, they're finding different ways to do it. Another thing, without getting into too much detail, they're looking at solid state batteries. So the current regular batteries have 2 solid electrodes with a uh, you know, cathode anode with a liquid electrode in between them, and they're looking at getting away from the liquid electrode and having more of a solid state, which will enable faster charging, better density. So I always look at and I explain to people is that we're still in the very early stages of this, and there's always research coming out to improve the technology and drive the cost down. And I know I've also heard like about fluoride ions as well, a lot of around silicone being used more. And the thing with silicone and sodium, they're much more plentiful and they're much easier to extract without the same sort of issues they would have from some of the rare earth metals.
Thank you, Devlin.
Yep. I'll just add a
So
bit more.
one of the things
Oh,
that's
sorry,
important to
Ross.
understand, Janine,
Yes.
is that lithium and sodium are essentially at the same place on the periodic table. And they're also mined the same way. You take a brine, which contains either sodium or lithium, and you put it in a pond and you let the sun evaporate all the water off, and then you bulldoze it into a pile. So the table salt that you eat is mined with the same process as the lithium that goes into the battery. The problem that most people are concerned about is something like cobalt that goes in the battery. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of publicity about the Congo, who mines their cobalt with very bad methods. They treat their people badly, and there's no safety and those kind of things.
Yes.
So the lithium titanate battery in my and my Mitsubishi has 0 cobalt in it. And the one in your cell phone is a cobalt-based electrode. The same with laptops, which some of us are using right at the moment, and
Yes.
a lot of commercial batteries for watches, and those tend to use cobalt.
I thought
By
all
far, the
rechargeable
biggest
batteries.
user of cobalt in the world is the petroleum refining industry. And it's necessary in order to turn crude oil into a gasoline or diesel fuel. And the amount of cobalt that's used in batteries is actually insignificant compared. The second biggest user of cobalt is in coloration of fabrics and ceramics and those kind of things. So that beautiful cobalt blue, you have to be concerned about that.
Yes.
Cobalt also comes from other countries, like Canada. If you look up Cobalt, Ontario, that's one of the biggest cobalt mines in North America. And that is a place where someone who wants a cobalt battery would be able to get something that's mined more, ecologically and also labor-wise more
With more fairness.
friendly, comfortable, with safety standards and all those kind of
Yes.
things.
Regard to health, a basic
Yes.
green principle, health, ecology, fairness, and care. And this
Right.
fairness, like the labor discrepancies and the inequities in returns on effort. Anyway, that's a different topic, but I think it does inform where we choose to pay, where we choose
Yes.
to use our money.
It's a
Thank
bit
you
of
for
that.
that. Great
So if you want to reduce your consumption of cobalt, then stop buying gasoline.
I
Buy a
think
green. Go good. Go ahead, Blair.
I'll just add a bit more to this. The one of the things that I think is missed when people say, "Oh, but EVs are so resource intensive. Look at all that lithium and cobalt and stuff they have to mine." EV batteries are 95% recyclable into new batteries. So while the upfront is costly, we have to dig up these minerals to sort of prod the process along. There are sort of a suspicion that in the long term, electrification, decarbonization of our economies will actually reduce the amount of minerals we need to be mining overall, because a lot of them are recoverable, whereas most of what powers our economies right now gets burnt.
There's a
So
lot of oh, sorry, Blair.
yeah, it's okay. If any of you are familiar with Hannah Ritchie, she's done some great blogging on this stuff in terms of how much materials are used and how much power is actually needed. So that's something to consider. We have to make sure that governments are ready to make sure this happens, that we don't just ship them off to another country to be taken care of. And there's a Canadian company involved in recycling batteries. Devlin?
Yeah, there's a U.S. company, Redwood Minerals or Redwood Materials. So the owner of that used to actually work for Tesla, and they've set up facilities, I think, near the Tesla factory in Las Vegas for the purpose of recycling the materials from the batteries to be repurposed. But also, sometimes you don't even have to recycle them, but they'll take batteries from other vehicles and they'll use them in in battery backup storage, because in those uses, you don't need the high discharge rates that you'd want to have for a car. Your space and weight isn't as much of an issue as it would be for a car. So you can reuse them in battery backups and stuff as well. So there's two ways that they can be actually repurposed.
Yep. I knew where
So
you're going with that.
another interesting thing around that too is like my car doesn't have the capability, but I think Blair's does, is vehicle to grid, where you can take battery from your vehicle and put it back into the grid. So there's actually a lot of places in the US where they'll have electric school buses, and they've actually used them in storm situations where they plug them back into the grid to provide energy back into the grid when power has gone out.
Yep.
So there is that flexibility as well, where you could, have your car, the power goes out, or you just drain power, pull power from your car back into your house to run your furnace and do those types of things as well.
We haven't tried that
Very
with ours.
cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
It's frowned upon by Manitoba Hydro,
Yeah.
just out of interest. But we actually very early looked at buying the F-150 Lightning because of the towing, and it wasn't worth it because it doesn't tow very far. But it would run a house's most central needs for a few days, that battery in that one. Maren, is it Maren?
Yes, hi, this is
Hi.
Maren here. I'm sorry, I'm on and off because I'm babysitting, and
Oh, no
as soon
problem.
the kids are kind of up, I have to quit. But I quickly want to introduce myself and say thank you very much for this workshop. It's just so great to get all the information. I have an EV myself, and
Okay.
I'm pretty new to it. And I bought the Cadillac Lyric in January, and
Nice.
since it was so new, it was hard to actually get an electric vehicle. So I quickly want to tell you my story because I just thought it's a better investment at this time. So I was looking around, and there were waiting lists on EVs, right? So this one I could get in. It's quite expensive, but then the same thing, I thought, okay, with the payments, and then if I don't pay for gas, makes it a little bit more affordable. I mean, the one thing is I live in the country, so I live an hour away from Winnipeg, south of Winnipeg. So all the myth around the EVs is just crazy. Like people out here, there is such a range anxiety, and I'm not so much into the technical stuff, and I was not maybe totally informed myself either. But it started with, first of all, because the vehicle is so new, it was difficult. We didn't get any federal funding for that, like this, because it was not signed up for that yet. So okay, we had to live with that. Okay, fine. We wanted to have this vehicle. I wanted to replace my old gasoline car. So I had to hurry to make up my mind. Otherwise, I would have lost the deal. Okay, so I didn't get that one. Then the deal was also that I would get my charger that was included in the deal. The dealership would pay for my charger in my home. I have a level 2 charger, but then to find an electrician, the electrician had never done it out here. So this was fairly new. He had no clue. And then they were worried about, okay, do we have enough in our house that, the breaker will not go when we charge the car. So the electrician actually was, I guess later on we found out that it had to be a certified certain kind of electrician that can only put the charger in. Oh, well, I let the dealership handle that part of it, but they were telling me afterwards it could have been only certain ones. They paid for the charger, which was all good, and we never had any issues. So we got this car and the vehicle in January. Then we left for a few months and only came back in March. And my husband wanted to pick me up with the car from the airport, and he was so worried, range anxiety. Can he actually go back and forth? The Cadillac Lyric on a full charge is at 80% is 400 kilometers. So, but in wintertime, it's also different. And since we didn't have any experience yet really to drive it in winter, we were kind of worried. So we charged it in Winnipeg and everything was fine. I think we could have made it back and forth. And we're not driving to the city so often, so we're very country people. So around here, it's just fine. And then the temperature changed. It got warmer out here. Like we didn't really have the winter driving yet. So I cannot say too much about it. But now with driving around the countryside, even Winnipeg back and forth, Steinbach, those are our distances, no problem at all. I love that car, the way it runs. If I take people, if you do carpooling, you take my car. We don't pollute. You take my car, not anyone else. It drives so nicely. I'm very excited about it. The winter part of it, yeah, it will be, we have to fill up. But now I heard you guys, you talked about it. I have the Flow card. I have never used it. We never really charged anywhere public, so I don't know. We just charge at home and it works perfect. So I have no complaints. And I think it's just a very good investment these days. I would have not, I think this is the way to go. So that's just my opinion. I have lots of country people here that are just like, what are you doing? You're crazy. But oh well, so that's all I want to say. This is
That's
my
great.
story.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Once you get them in the vehicle and you put the pedal all the way
Pedal
down, they go,
down.
oh, this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Exactly. Especially my husband, he was not for it either. He drives a big pickup truck and stuff, but when he drove this car, and he loves it too, just because of that part. Sorry to say,
exactly.
my husband is not an environment guy, so
Got a lot of get up and went.
Yeah.
We had the same kind of thing happen because we're in this little town and it's all pickup trucks and snowmobiles and stuff, and we're at the curling we go curling every week, and there's a guy, you know, the whole parking lot's filled with big trucks, and we hear people talking, you know, oh, what are they going to do if they have trouble? They're going to freeze to death, and they're never going to make it to the city. And no. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, whatever, guys. I'll take you for a ride
exactly.
anytime. And yeah, in the summer, I've done trips where I've gone from here at West Hawk Lake to Steinbach, do a bunch of shopping there because it's kind of our biggest close city, and then to the airport, and then back to West Hawk without a charge.
Wow.
Like we got 100 kilometers left by the time we get home. Like it's beautiful to drive.
Yes.
So
And that's what
yeah.
we are thinking about going on a road trip, right? I mean,
Yep.
now with this car, it will be a little bit of an adventure to figure it all out and where to charge if you go on a longer road
Yep.
trip. But all the money we save on gasoline and we spend now on nicer places to stay in, kind of thing, right? So
Absolutely.
we rather
Yeah.
take the car now, and the pollution part, I mean, definitely for me, it's very important, right? If I can do a trip like that without polluting the way we did before, this is just great, you know? So
Yeah.
I think it's just a win-win situation.
We haven't done that yet, but I'm sure there's one in our future. Neat hint though, last time I was out in Cape Breton last fall with our ice vehicle, but I noticed that in the major hiking trails all around Cape Breton, there were EV chargers that were free. So you'll find little
Okay.
treats like that. And actually, one of the first EVs I talked to an owner was a couple of years ago at Mount Robson, and he was there charging his Bolt that he'd driven all the way from Maryland up through the Maritimes, all the way across
Wow.
Canada to Mount Robson. No problems, just a little bit of planning. They don't have a huge range, the Bolt. So it was really neat. Yeah. And yeah.
I
There are
know I
some
was
That's gotta be
driving.
the biggest myth.
Sorry,
That's-
go ahead.
That's
There
gotta
are
be
some
the
apps
biggest
on.
myth,
Sorry,
that you
Russ.
can't do road trips, especially in the wintertime. I bought my Tesla secondhand in December of 2022. And I drove it back to Winnipeg in 2 days in the middle of winter in December. And I drove 1,200 kilometers a day. Um, and it was easy. And it was fun to drive, and it was comfortable and relaxing, and it was just a joy to drive. And yes, you can do road trips. My
Yay.
latest road trip was to see my family and friends in Alberta and BC. No, Alberta and Saskatchewan during the polar vortex. There were 3 days when the temperature did not rise above minus 35 degrees. And I drove through all that, and my brother's Honda wouldn't start, and my nephew's Jeep wouldn't start, and I drove them around town in my Tesla, and everything was just fine. The heat worked great, and you know, everything was fabulous. And a guy's diesel died on the side of the road, and I picked him up and I took him to the next town and dropped him at a service station. And you know, the myth is busted, clearly. You can do road trips, you can drive in the wintertime, and minus 40 is not a problem.
And it will only get easier once you have the singular North American charging standard. Then it becomes easier to have more chargers around in different areas. It makes it that much easier. There's also apps. I have an app on my phone that I don't really need to use because I don't go that far, but it will show you all the chargers, where they are along the way. So if you need any help planning, there's those options as well.
Excellent. Go ahead, Dennis.
So thanks, Devil. And that's maybe a connection to the question I was going to pose next, and that was, are there different kinds of level 2 chargers, for example, if you install one and there's a cost to doing that, could you use that same level 2 charger if you were to sell and get a different EV? Similarly, level 3 chargers, clearly there are some differences. Tesla has its own, if I'm not mistaken, from kind of the rest of the pack. You want to clarify, any of you?
So there's a couple of charging standards. So there's the Tesla standard, which is the NACS, the North American Charging Standard. There's another one which is the CCS, and then there's a third standard. So they have those three standards, and they kind of all have their charging within their silo. So as you see, like again, it's a North American charging standard. So like Blair mentioned before, with the level 1 and level 2 are both AC current, and the level 3 is actually a DC current. So with some of the other level 3 charging plugs, they're quite large because they have to be able to handle the DC current. Whereas within the Tesla plug, it actually will recognize whether it's an AC or DC, and it switches automatically, so it's much smaller and much simpler. So as everything transitions towards that North American charging standard, it'll make it a lot more easy. What you're also seeing is companies like Hyundai, I think, and Kia, for example, will come out with adapters. So Blair's car wouldn't necessarily have the NACS standard, but they will come out with an adapter that he can use to be able to use the North American charging standard in the future. So that's how they'll bridge that gap to the new standard.
So
And
just
again, for a lot of the chargers, so if you already have like a flow charger that's a CCS standard, they'll be able to go in and just because the electrical stuff in the background is still the same. They're just going to have to change some of the hardware to transition it to the NACS charging standard.
And so that's really level 3, right? So if, let's say, Devlin and Ross with your Tesla, you visited Blair with your Ionic, or maybe visited Marin with your Cadillac, could you plug into those different level 2s regardless of car? Or is there still that differentiation even at level?
There's still differentiation.
Yes.
I have an
Yes.
adapter that I can put on mine, and
Yeah.
saying Ross might have it as well.
Yeah.
I see.
Yes.
Well, that's pretty good.
Both of my cars use 2 different standards. The older car, the Mitsubishi, it uses a J1772 standard. It's a fairly good sized plug, about the size of your fist, and it's shaped like a gun. And you push it in the side of the car, and it's pretty easy to use. But the Tesla standard is quite different. It's about the size of 3 of my fingers. And again, you plug it in the side of your car. But the 2 plugs are quite different in size and shape. And so you can't use them on the other car. But like Delvin said, I have a plug, an adapter plug that will change J1772 to Tesla. And I take that with me on trips all the time.
It's like if you're traveling to another country and you bring one of those travel adapters that you just put a different adapter on to adapt it to a different plug. It's the same sort of concept until we all get to that same standard.
And clearly there's really only 2 that I know of that are really hugely widespread in North America right now, and they're clearly all moving to the Tesla standard, the North American standard. So that's going to sort itself out pretty quickly. Jill?
Yeah.
If I could add to the discussion, when we ordered our level 2 charger, we had the choice of getting the Tesla plug or the J1772 plug, which are the 2 most popular standards for level 2 charging. The J1772 is like CCS without the 2 extra prongs on the bottom for DC fast charging. So CCS is really a modified J1772 plug, which is the most popular standard other than the NACS standard for Tesla. But you can get adapters either way to convert one type of plug to the other when you're using a level 2 charger. It's different for level 3 because with Tesla chargers, there's an ID built into the charging port. So when you plug in a supercharger to a Tesla, there's actually communication between the car and the charger that identifies the vehicle. So you're billed automatically to your credit card for the charging. And so for these other cars that use the CCS standard, when they're going to be providing adapters to charge at Tesla superchargers, the identification will be in the adapter. And so that adapter will be tied to your credit card. So you don't want to lose that adapter or have it stolen, because then people could start charging on your card. Getting back to level 2, though, the other difference that you might encounter in level 2 chargers is the maximum current. So typically they can charge at 20 amps, 30 amps, 40 amps, 48 amps. And it depends what amperage breaker you have on your charger. And you're usually supposed to not charge at more than 80% of the breaker rating. So for us, we have a 50 amp breaker. So we set the charger to charge at a maximum of 40 amps. If it were on a 40 amp breaker, we wouldn't charge at more than 32 amps.
My
So
Tesla,
that has an impact on how quickly it will charge on a level 2 charger. So it's not just that you've got double the voltage from a level 1 charger, but it's also much more current. So that's why they charge so much faster.
my
Go ahead,
Tesla
Ross.
has a larger level 2 charger, so it'll actually charge at 80 amps. So you have to have a 100 amp breaker on your level 2 in order to provide current to the car. However, the car is actually kind of smart. So it knows that I have a smaller charger in my garage, and it knows now that I've told it about the charging structure in my garage. It knows if I plug into 120 volts that it can only draw 12 amps. And if I plug into 240 volts, that I have 24 volts or 24 amps to provide to the car, because I don't have that big a breaker going to my garage. But you know, if I go somewhere else like Fort White has an 80 amp outlets, level 2 charging outlets, and so I can charge there a lot faster. So I can get a, you know, half a tank, so to speak, half a battery full
half a
of
yeah.
juice in, and you know, an hour and a half or 2 hour walk. I like going out to Fort White because I see all wildlife, and it's a great place to sort of chill and relax. And
I think I'll just make one more statement here. Dennis is going to ask another question, but I think I'm listening to this going, that sounds really confusing, but it is not that bad. It really isn't. And I think the standards are shaking out so that it's not going to take long before we're all on the same page. So it's with any new tech, right? It's a beta VHS kind of thing. And
yeah,
we know going into this that we were on the bleeding edge. So
the point I was trying to make was that it's set up once, and it's really easy, and the car knows exactly how much current to draw, and so I don't have to think about it, and my wife doesn't have to know anything about electricity. She just plugs in the cord and it works correctly. It's easy.
absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful news.
Can I ask an unrelated question? And I may be asking on behalf of 2 or 3 people here who maybe live in condos or co-housing units, and perhaps some of the panelists might be aware, but what's the situation for people, say, living in multi kind of family dwellings like condo units? Have you seen or heard of condos in Winnipeg that are starting to put in chargers? Do they allow their condo owners or in apartment blocks for tenants to charge level 1 style? Do you have a sense for where we're at with those kinds of living situations?
I don't have a good sense of it. I think it's
It's
starting
all
to
over the map.
happen, but yeah, it's all over the place.
It's-
I know, there's some places are saying, here's an outlet you can, or at least the technologies around that you can have an outlet that can be shared amongst people. We'll do load balancing on a circuit. If 4 people plug into 4 outlets, it'll balance the load, it'll share it. There's all sorts of tech, but again, that's still
yeah,
coming along.
the
It had occurred, there's some thoughts here, and because you bring up an important question, and it's an important one when we sort of think about some of the myths that got involved again, because you hear, how are we going to have enough electricity for millions and millions of people to be charging their cars overnight? The average Canadian commute is 12 kilometers a day. something like 54% live in houses. So the vast majority of people are not going to need to do a full 77 kilowatt hour charge every night, which is what our battery's capacity is. We don't even need to do that most of the time, right? Even though we're driving long ranges sometimes. So it's not like all these cars are going to be sitting there charging all the time and they need to have shared. Someone living in a condo actually could go to a public charger when they need to have high-speed charging because they only need to charge once a week, right? Like the gas, you can go for a week without. Everybody needs a home charger. That said, I was thinking with my Green Party policy cap on that I'm going to write a policy that we should actually be looking at any new construction of.
Blair froze. I would estimate saying any new construction should have capacity for charging built into the location.
Yes.
But
Agreed.
but the point that I think Blair was trying to make was you're only going to need a few kilowatt hours every night. And you can
Yep.
easily do that on level 1. And currently I have 2 EVs and I have one level 1 outlet and I'm charging both cars and we just alternate which one parks in the garage. So tonight is the night for the Mitsubishi and tomorrow will be the night for the Tesla. And one car will, charge 4 kilowatt hours tonight and the next one will charge, 5 or 7 or whatever it is tomorrow night because it's gone farther or whatever. But the point is it doesn't matter. It will take 3 hours to fill one of the cars and you're sleeping anyway, so who cares? Doesn't matter whether it's 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours. Because
Good point.
I'm gonna throw another question out unless somebody else wants to throw their hand out quick, but this is about buying a car. So what kinds of things would the panel recommend a would-be potential EV buyer look at when they're shopping around? I mean, beyond the obvious, the price is going to be a key influence, but what about things like warranty on the battery? What about things like Marin, who had a level 2 charger installed as part of the package? Are there other things that maybe aren't so obvious that one would look at when they're shopping for buying a car? Kicking the tires, so to speak.
Welcome back, Blair.
Thanks. I don't know what happened to our internet. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Ross and Devlin both tried to finish your thought for you, and it was very interesting, but might you
Good.
want to finish it yourself before we answer Dennis's question?
I don't know where I cut off. So the point was that not everybody's going to have a full load every night, and in fact it's going to be load balanced all over the place.
Excellent.
And I don't know if you got to the part where I was thinking from a Green Party policy point of view,
Yes.
that I'm actually going to go write a policy on new construction should just have that outlet. It actually would be pretty simple. We put in a stove, we put in an outlet for these things. Like, why not a charger too?
Exactly. Excellent. Thank you.
I know my brother in Halifax lives in an apartment building and he would like to get an EV, but his apartment complex doesn't allow it. So he'd have to drive somewhere to a charger and getting, so for him, it doesn't work. But I think as more places become more progressive, that'll be again another differentiating factor to have more people stay in place A versus place B because they offer some of those different amenities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One interesting thing that you should remember is that in the wintertime, when somebody's plugged in the block heater to on gas powered car, that uses more electricity than my car will when I'm filling up with electricity.
Right. Yeah.
That's
So,
important.
so
So
Dennis,
it'll
when
be
you
a
asked,
net saving in electricity switching from gas to electric in the wintertime.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's another Hannah Ritchie article that sort of intersects with this. That's kind of interesting, is that as we electrify, our overall energy requirements, if you just measure the energy requirements, our overall energy requirements go down because electricity is far more efficient than burning fossil fuels.
Yeah, it requires a whole lot of electricity to change crude oil into gasoline.
Yeah.
So if you have light sweet crude, it takes about 2 kilowatt hours to make 1 liter of gasoline. And I can go farther on those 2 kilowatt hours than you can
On the
burning the
gasoline.
gas in your ICE powered vehicle.
That's right. Yeah.
However, in Manitoba, we don't use light sweet crude, gasoline from light sweet crude.
That's
What
right.
we use is gasoline from oil sands or tar sands, depending on how you look at it. And that requires 6 kilowatt hours in order to change it, along with a whole bunch of natural gas and other things, right?
Yeah.
But just the electricity requirements is 6 kilowatt hours, and I can go about 4 times farther
Wow.
on
Yep.
that.
That's
On
great.
that
Well,
6
now
kilowatt
you've
hours
sold
than you
us.
can on your liter of gas.
You've sold us. So now back to Dennis's question, which is appropriate. We've been talking for a little over an hour, and Dennis, you were asking. So tell us about the buying experience. Do you want to refine it any more than that?
Well, I bought my car, my first car in 2011, but I put a deposit on it in 2008.
Wow.
And so it meant that I had to sit for 3.5 years and just wait for the car to arrive.
Okay.
So that was rather painful, but the
I'd say.
manufacturing process has caught up somewhat. So cars are delivered a lot quicker.
Yeah. We
You
when we
should
bought it. Sorry, go ahead.
you should buy a car that's appropriate for what you need. So my Mitsubishi is a tiny little commuter car. And at the time, that's exactly what I needed in order to go back and forth to work every day. And it served me very well. And my wife drove it to work today. She's still driving it to work every single day. The Tesla is more appropriate for highway. If you're going to go long distances, it's got a 400 plus kilometer range, and it will go to Edmonton, in a day and a half, Vancouver in 2 days. Once you've decided what size of car is appropriate for you, then you should sit down and compare. And right now, the price difference between a gas-powered car and an electric car is somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 difference for the same kind of car. I mean, if you compare a Cadillac to a Mitsubishi i-MiEV electric, right? It's not fair. And the same if you compare it the other way around. So you're going to pay $5,000 more, but you're going to save yourself $200 a month in gas. And so what that means is that your total out-of-pocket money every month is going to be less when you're driving electric, because you're saving that much money on gasoline every single month.
Nice. Maren, did you want to share something?
Yes, maybe I want to add to that. When I was buying my Cadillac, I compared it to the Acadia Denali. because I'm visually impaired and I want to have all the safety items that you can have on a vehicle. So you are right, the difference was not that big. And that's why I at the end went with the electric car, because I thought I might as well get it then. But then I was very frustrated. I didn't get the federal funding for it. That it was, I think that's something, I don't know why they cannot even after the fact reimburse you for it. I think the Cadillac was so new, they didn't get to the certification yet. That's why we couldn't get it. I think that was the reason. It was such a quick buy because because you had to hurry so much to get a vehicle. I mean, that's part of it, that there's not enough out there, and it takes forever to get these vehicles, but that you not after the fact get the money back. I mean, even when I went to insure, to go to the local place to insure my vehicle, there was no history because the car was so new, right? There's no history on it, and I guess some things are kind of slow, like it is a very slow process, and I think there should be more funding for encouraging people to do this. I mean, that part I was find it frustrating. Even now, like, I mean, this is May now. Why can't I get the fund, get the money from the federal government now? Why is it too late now?
It's not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, the governments are slow to pick up on things. For the first 2 years that I drove my Mitsubishi, I drove a Class 27 unidentified vehicle. That was the official registration for my car. It just was bizarre. It was entered in the, Manitoba Public Insurance database and all that, and still they couldn't give me, a registration for a Mitsubishi. It was just lame.
Oh, that's frustrating.
So that's one of the joys of being an early adopter, is that you get to work through lots of really weird issues.
I guess so.
Claire, you wanted
Hi,
to shoot again.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
we can.
Okay, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm on my phone because our internet went down. I have no idea why. I might try to get back on in a minute.
Okay.
That never happens, but it did. So
Good night.
anyway, our experience was a little different too. I wanted to say, Marin, you might be able to get the new provincial rebate. I understand, even though we bought ours in August, we should be able to get the rebate retroactively. We didn't get the federal rebate because our car was used slightly, because someone had wanted an Ioniq 5, had to wait, and then the Ioniq 5 came in and they swapped it for swapped their 6 for the 5, whereas we wanted the 6. and it was on the lot, so we took it because we could get it away, which at the time was impossible. Now there seems to be some more around. And otherwise it was a great experience. The interesting thing, I'm wondering why that person wanted the 5, because the Ioniq 5 and the 6, interestingly enough, this is a techie thing, they're built on the same platform, but the 6 has way better range because it's such a more dynamic, like aerodynamic car. So, which to us, that was really attractive. We made a big spreadsheet of all the, ranges and costs and this and that and the other thing, and the Ioniq was super attractive for us. So.
Great, thank you.
I would add in as well, like, my purchase is pretty easy. I did mine all online, and they delivered it to the co-op out on Google, and I picked it up there. But I think now, like where Ross said when he was an early adopter, I think there are enough electric vehicles out that there's enough of a history and a practice that it's kind of like buying a new vehicle of an ICE brand, because again, they're not brand new to these car companies. So you're still going to have some car companies have better quality than others. You're still going to look at what cost range do you want to be in versus what driving range you want to be in. And with everything kind of going towards the North American charging standard, you can kind of know that that's coming down the road. So you shouldn't have to worry too much about charging capabilities. So there's really not much, I don't think, complexity, different complexity for EVs. Lockhart, I see Cookie, you have your hand up there.
I just wanted to ask if Marin had a question before, or if she just hasn't put her hand down from earlier. in case.
Sorry, not really a question. My hand is still up. I can't see very well, right? That's why it's
Okay.
still up. But while I'm on, maybe there's something I wanted to add too quickly. It's like I'm from Germany, as you can tell, I'm sure. And there's a lot of things happening in that direction, and a lot of e-vehicles. It's more and more coming out there. And that program that they are having there as well is if you are getting a solar system on your roof, people that buy an e-vehicle get a better price on the solar system on the roof. So those kind of things, I would love to see more about around here too. That,
Cool.
it makes sense, like to have other environmentally friendly systems because you have an e-vehicle, you get a better price. Makes sense to me. Yeah. So I just
Great.
wanted to add that part of it,
Thank
There's a
you.
lot more going on in Europe, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm gonna put my hand down, sorry.
We'll be inspired. Lockhart, Cookie, you wanted to say
Yeah.
something?
So we're on the cusp of something technologically pretty interesting. If you look at the history of the conversion from the horse to the automobile, it happened in under a decade.
Wow.
The city of New York, which I recently read stats on, in the year 1900, they were removing 250 tons of horse manure every day, 900 dead animals every day, and they had hundreds of thousands of horses in New York. And in 1913, there were none. And the entire support industry of those horses was also gone. In 2003, digital cameras came into the common market. You could buy a Canon 3.2 megapixel camera for $900 that didn't take a tenth of the picture that your phone will now. But within 5 years, the entire film industry was gone. And it's gonna come to the point where suddenly everybody is going to go over to the electrical vehicles because all of the infrastructure is going to be there. And it's going to come down to, are we going to be on EVs or are we going to be on hydrogen? It depends on which way it goes. And, cassette or 8-track, where do you want to be? But I think the ice is dead. Maybe not this week or this year, but it's dead.
Really soon.
And
Thank
it's
you,
gonna,
Blair.
and it's going to happen suddenly. You're going to wake up one morning and go, holy crap, where did all of those things go?
Thank you, Cookie. Blair?
So because he brought up, Lockhart brought up hydrogen, I'll just make a couple comments on it because I think it's an interesting line of inquiry. A lot of people are, well, I'll just wait for hydrogen, and it's an interesting question, right? I think there's the familiarity with driving into a gas station and being able to fill up the car really quickly translates in people's minds to hydrogen, but it doesn't. I'm not sure that it really works well. And even Toyota seems to be starting, they were the big proponents of hydrogen. They seem to be backing off of it. So I'm no expert, but here's what I understand. Some of you may have heard the terms of the different colors of hydrogen. There's black and gray and brown and green and blue, green, pink, white, and maybe others. Plaid, I don't know. Green and pink are the only two, other than white, that aren't made with fossil fuels in some degree. So it's extracted, black, brown, blue are extracted from coal or oil or natural gas. And that all means that we've got to do fracking. We've got to keep digging up oil. That's just not tenable in a low carbon future. Pink and green is produced from, they're both produced from water. Green using renewable energy, electricity, and pink using nuclear energy, electricity. White is, we're going to pull it out of the earth. That's not happening. It's just not abundant enough, and it would cost too much to extract. So now you got to take energy, and hydrogen's hard to extract from water. Water's a tight molecule. So you've got to dump a whole pile of energy into creating that hydrogen. Then you have to ship it, this hugely volatile material, You have to compress it, ship it, decompress it, put it into cars without blowing stuff up. The cars themselves burning it are only 60% efficient. Now that's better than an ICE engine at 25% efficient, but you still lose waste and heat. Yeah, there's water coming out of your exhaust pipe, but if you're going to generate that electricity to extract the hydrogen, you may as well put it in a battery and run it
Yes,
95% efficient. So that's my thing on hydrogen.
lovely.
Devlin's
Devlin,
got his hand up there.
And it's extremely expensive. It costs
Yep.
8 times more than gasoline or diesel fuel to run
Yep.
the same vehicle the same distance.
wow. Devlin,
So
your turn.
I just kind of two things. So one, back to what Koki was talking about batteries. They now said we're at a tipping point where there is so much investment in new batteries that we don't have to worry about it falling back. There's so much money involved that it's going to only keep getting better. So currently, the cost for a car battery is around $100 to $110, $120 per kilowatt hour. CATL, which is the largest battery manufacturer, says by the end of this year, they'll have it down to $56 per kilowatt hour. So that's a significant reduction from investment and improvements in processes. So that's just going to further, move this forward. It's going to get better and better. And back to the kind of the hydrogen is I'm thinking this as well. Yeah, like to Blair's point, it's extremely costly in order to and Ross to separate the hydrogen atom, but then you have to store it at pressure, and it's just so difficult to do to transport it that right now, based on current technology, it's not remotely feasible. It's based on current technology, it's a pipe dream now. It's something that I think they should continue to research and invest in, but right now, yeah, it's not remotely feasible.
Thank you, Devlin. Thank you. Well, folks, we've got 10 minutes to the 9 minutes till the top of the hour, so we've certainly easily filled this time. Any other pressing questions? Or we obviously have a very knowledgeable group of folks here, and I am amazed by the amount of information shared. Thank you so much to everyone.
Laura's got a hand up there.
Go ahead, Laura.
I just wonder, my brother is one of those negative people who don't believe in electric vehicles due to the dirtiness of the electricity. How do you, such as
So
nuclear or coal? So
Yep.
what do you say to people like my brother?
So here's the thing, if you go to a place that produces its electricity by coal, you have this centralized process that is far more efficient than having thousands and thousands and thousands of little internal combustion engines running around. So while here in Manitoba we're running hydro, the resource balance between a ICE vehicle, because a lot of their resource stuff is up front, it's about 2 years, that your EV is way ahead in terms of resource usage. In a place that burns coal, it might be 5 or 7 years. It's still going to be ahead in its whole life because centralized energy production is more efficient. And in fact, Hannah Ritchie, again, one of my favorite bloggers, she actually suggests that that coal in that case may actually be better than natural gas for electricity production because coal's easier to mine. You don't have to frack. You don't have to, it's not so energy intensive to dig out of the ground. You're actually ahead by using coal as a centralized energy production to run an electrical grid. So,
Wow.
yeah, so it's kind of fascinating, those numbers, but you cannot just assume that, oh, they're burning coal. Well, it's still okay.
Thank you, Blair.
Okay.
Thank you, Blair.
So the argument I think that your brother is putting forward is that EVs are truly not a zero emission vehicle.
Yeah.
And that is basically false. As I drive down the road, there are zero emissions coming out of my vehicle. There's absolutely nothing. And you compare that to burning a liter of gasoline, which is 2,360 grams of CO2.
Yeah.
And then I think your brother's argument will go something like this, but you have to generate the electricity. So in Manitoba, we're extremely fortunate. We have clean, low carbon electricity. So my car will run about 2,000 times less CO2 comparing to extracting and refining that liter of gasoline. It's not even close. You have to run a refinery in order to get the gasoline. You have to generate electricity in order to run an electric car. And the two are not close in Manitoba. However, if you happen to live in Alberta or Wyoming or some other place where they use a lot of fossil fuels in order to generate their electricity, you're right. The electric car is only about 5 or 8 times better than what Alberta is. With respect to the refinery versus the electricity generation part of it, with respect to burning the gasoline, it's no contest.
Yep.
It's zero compared to 2 kilograms of CO2 every single liter.
Excellent.
Doesn't even
Thank you.
compare. Another argument, I'll just quickly say this, I know we're running out of time, but it's like, how is the electrical grid going to keep up with this? Well, here's a cool thing from a tech geek thing. They're starting, and this was in the news just this morning on CNN or something, is that there's this thing called reconductoring. That if you look at how a big hydro line is made, those wires are a steel core with a wrapping of aluminum that's the conductor. The steel core there's for strength, so that when they're hanging from tower to tower, they don't break. The aluminum is how the electricity moves. Aluminum's pretty light. So what they're doing, and they do this a lot in Europe, is that they use a graphite core, like Kevlar or whatever. It's super strong and it's super light. And you can use the same power line and get almost, so you can put now a thicker aluminum conductor, and you can use the same power line and transmit almost double the amount of electricity down it.
Wow.
So
And even
there's
in the
also,
US,
But
Yep.
in the US,
you're
we're also
kind of missing
expanding.
the point about generation.
yeah,
About 6 or 8 years ago, Manitoba Hydro did a report on what would happen if every single vehicle in Manitoba instantaneously switched to electricity.
right.
They said, yes, we recognize that this is impossible, but could the grid survive?
Right.
And they came to the conclusion that 99% of us are going to charge our cars while we're sleeping, and that's when the grid is sitting almost idle. And so therefore, we don't have to build any additional
Build more, right.
infrastructure.
Good point.
We don't have to have any additional generators. We don't have to have any additional transmission lines. We can just plug in everybody's car at night. We can fill them up and we can drive all day.
Good point. Yep. Thanks. Appreciate that. Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, many excellent points have been made this evening. Thank you all so very much for joining us. And thank you very much to our panelists, Ross Redmond, Devlin Hinchy, Blair McAfee, and Gilles. Thank you as well, Gilles. Yes, and the questions. You primed the pump really well, Dennis, with some questions for us to think about earlier. And I maybe close with one image that I really like. I love flowers. I think the earth laughs in flowers, so I like to plant them and give them away and have them around as much as possible. And apparently in Japan, they have recharge areas that are kind of like the old car hop places where the cars pull in underneath to charge, and above them are gardens that shade the cars while they are charging with the electricity. So I guess the solar panels that are charging must be someplace else, but the gardens are up there. So I love that image. So I'll leave you with that that image of what we can do and what the possibilities are. So thank you so much to those of you that have invested in EVs, and thank you for helping inspire us to focus on what I think will soon be the goal for very many of us, is to join you in having more efficient vehicles. Yes, Dennis, please go ahead.
And just to put a plug in, so our next session for our monthly series will be Wednesday. We're going to try to mix it up a bit. Wednesday, June 26th. And the topic will be basic income, an update and Q&A. And our guests will be none other than Professor Evelyn Forget and Sid Frankel, both at the U of M and internationally acclaimed.
Highly respected.
Yeah, and they just attended the Basic Income Conference in Ottawa last weekend. Will give us an update next month on what they learned and experienced. So circle your calendars. We'll be getting the word out loud and clear, but you've got the early bird notice.
Yes. And I'll just add with that, thank you so much, Dennis. We'll just close with, if anyone would like to join the Green Party in the Gay Pride Parade, June 2nd at Memorial Boulevard. We're going to be at float number 161 in aisle G. And at 11 o'clock after the rally, you can join me there. I'll be on my little electric scooter, not an EV, but an electric scooter that I'll decorate up. And we'll be having behind the green banner of health, ecology, fairness, and care. So look forward to seeing some of you there. Thanks so much for your participation tonight.
Janine, it is your own personal electric vehicle.
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Well, thank you all. This has been a lovely evening. Very interesting. And thanks for everyone agreeing to record it. I agree that it's a great resource for us to have.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Great.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Night.
Good night.